Where is the balance between owning your own data and giving complete access? Enter OpenClaw, but are you giving away the keys to your castle? AI is moving so fast that most organizations are still writing the policy while the technology has already left the building. Our next session brings together 4 practitioners who are in the thick of it, building, deploying, and yes, I wrote a new word here, and questioning the rules around AI at scale. They're going to explore what it actually looks like to scale an open, user-controlled approach to AI, not just in theory, but inside real organizations with real constraints. So they're not going to be shy about taking their own positions. So we're going to have Ian introduce the group. He is then going to pass the mic to Susan Sullivan, and then we have Dave R., Ed Cavazos, and James Beecham. Did I get everyone? Yeah. Awesome. Here we go. All right, Ian, do your introduction.
First off, good morning. Thanks for the swap. I've had a great South by, so my voice is pretty much gone. It'll be gone by noon. So Susan has been fantastic to step in, and frankly, she knows this far better than I do anyway, so you'll want to hear from her. But thanks for braving a Sunday morning panel. So good on all of you. But from a raise of hands, just curious from the crowd, who's using OpenClaw or ClawBot or however you want to call it? Raise a high. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Okay. Who wants to use OpenClaw? Okay. I'm just going to poll. Somebody just yell it at me. Why aren't you using it yet? Tyler, go for it.
I don't want to get fired.
Okay. Security. Anybody else? That's a good one. I don't want to get fired either. Security and technical details. Okay. I'm assuming on the security piece, it's, hey, I saw the Meta exec get her whole inbox deleted. Yes. So we're in a really exciting time. The innovation is changing weekly. I spent 10 years in service. We got to see tech roll out very quickly. However, very quickly, even in a combat environment, was 3 to 4 months at fastest, right? We're now in an environment, and I think the panelists will all agree with me, where as it rolls out weekly, the tech is innovating faster than the policy. It's innovating faster than safety, and it's innovating faster than we can even communicate to each other on how to adapt. So I'm very excited about this panel. We have experts up here. Thanks for taking the time to come out.
Thanks, Ian, for the intro. I would like the panelists to briefly introduce themselves first before we get started, and then we'll move into some questions.
Hi, I'm Ed Cavazos. I'm a lawyer here in Austin with a law firm called Pillsbury. We have 700 lawyers around the country and 50 here in Austin, and we basically do technology work. My practice has become an AI practice over the last few years, almost exclusively because of the various issues involved with AI. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Texas Law School. I've been for 28 years doing that. And I'm talking right now at the law school in my current classes. I'm teaching a course called Content Licensing, which is looking at the issue of how content's treated on the internet, particularly training of AI, those types of things. So practicing for 30-some years. So that's me.
Hello, everybody. My name is James Beecham. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a data security company called ALTR, spelled ALTR because ALTER.com was $20 million. I'm not kidding. It's still for sale for $20 million. I've made a few offers for $50, but they haven't taken it yet. I'm a hardware engineer by education from Austin, Texas. Went to the University of Texas. IBM brought my parents here, so kind of been in and around the enterprise world my entire life. Focus a lot now on how data can be stored and accessed in ways that, as kind of part of the intro Ian mentioned, changing very rapidly. Everybody wants to use these tools, these technologies very quickly, but trying to make sure we don't hit some of the same speed bumps as the cloud migrations that we had. I don't know if anybody remembers months and months of open S3 buckets constantly happening over and over again. I think that's going to be a minor thing relative to kind of some of the things we're seeing here. Big sports lover. So again, also thanks for coming on Sunday morning.
Hi, I'm Dave R. I am a technical product marketing manager for Coder, and I'll actually through our talk today, we'll talk about what Coder does. I used to be a sales engineer, moved over to the technical product marketing side. Before that, I was at HashiCorp, did a hitch there, and then before that, I was at VMware for many, many years as a consultant and a sales engineer. I joined the Pivotal team after the Pivotal acquisition, and started, doing more Kubernetes stuff, right? And before that, I was a full stack developer. So I went from developer software to infrastructure automation to OpenStack to Kubernetes to, I'm done talking about it already, right? It's just crazy how fast this industry moves. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I consider this an honor to be able to sit up here in front of a room full of really smart people, smarter than me, and maybe even try to impart some opinions and knowledge to you. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you. I'm really excited about the panel today because I think each of you bring a unique perspective from a legal perspective, governance perspective, and execution perspective. So the first question, OpenClaw, when we think about that, we also think about sovereign AI. So what do you think sovereign AI means? Is it ownership of the model, the data, the hardware, or something else entirely?
I can start. I think it's going to have two components from what I see. Fortunately and unfortunately, part of my job is to talk to Gartner a lot. Does anybody, show of hands, know who Gartner is? Yep. Besides Ed, who's my lawyer, they're my second largest expense at the company. Just in last October was at their IT symposium conference and got on stage. Daryl Plummer did. He's a big famous analyst over there. And his whole thing was about sovereign AI. And he had two kind of key components to it. The first was the data, I think was the one area, Susan, to answer your question directly. There's, I think, a big push to keep that data within those boundaries, within those walls. And I think part of the reason is because there is still a little bit of an unknown on how these systems work, how the information gets leaked and shared across the shared compute and other things. And so the data piece is really big. I know people are really focused on that. Probably every other LinkedIn refresh I hit, everyone's going back to the data center because they want to be able to keep that data in there. But I think the second part of my answer is the model itself and the training. We see bias already being put in to the models because, believe it or not, humans created these things, even though I know the AI systems are now writing them and helping with it, but humans have bias, and so I think what you're going to see too is a lot of sovereign AI discussion around the model itself and the training and some of the morals that it was put in there for. We just saw this play out with the Department of War and Anthropic over the past couple of weeks, where ethics and morals and everything, get in the way of $100 billion or something like that. So I think it's data and it's the model. I think it's what's going to happen. But the data is the easier one to control right now.
Yeah, and I can't argue with that, but I do have a little bit different position. I think there's 4 key areas. I think number 1 is the hardware, which that's pretty easy, right? You can go buy a Mac Mini, put it on your desk, it's yours, right? Nobody can tell you what to do with it, it's yours, right? The open weight models, I think we want sovereignty over that, but let's be honest, with DeepSeek and Llama, you've got policies. You've got licensing that you have to do. So it's not truly yours. Because if you do something that's outside of their acceptable use policy, then they're going to shut you down, right? The other one is data, which I agree with you. I think we're all trying to protect our data, but let's be honest, there's nobody in this room right now that doesn't have data out on the internet. You can't do it. If you go get a plane ticket or you want to check on the status of a plane ride or a flight, you're going to have to send data, and it's going to have to go over the internet, and that's the way it is. So my position is, not arguing with this gentleman at all, but my position is it's about what I can do versus what somebody else tells me I can do. I want to do what I want to do, and I don't want anybody else telling me what to do. So it's the decision-making that's really more of a philosophical claim wrapped inside of a kind of a technical implementation. But to me, it would be the decision-making. I want to decide what my agent does and where it goes. and I will control where it goes and what data goes out and what models I use, et cetera, and so on. And so I think, for me, that's probably the biggest argument.
Yeah, I'll just add that something I think we're going to see more in this discussion is when you have control of that domain, quote, sovereign AI, and you have, control of the hardware and control of the data, and maybe not full control of the model because you are under a license, you can use that control to make conscious decisions about what legal jurisdiction you are in and subject to. Because currently, if you're got a server in one place and you've got, you're feeding stuff to an LLM somewhere else, while for us in the U.S., we often don't feel the impact of that because a lot of that stays in the U.S. But
Typically in the U.S. anyways.
right,
Yeah.
but if you're in another country, for example, you would feel the impact of that because it opens you up to potential jurisdiction for interacting with those systems, and the laws are really different. So, for example, there are jurisdictions like Japan where training on copyrighted materials has been fully blessed. You can train on copyrighted materials. In the U.S., that issue is still very, very open as to whether or not that's legal. Almost 100 lawsuits being litigated right now on that issue. Sovereign AI lets you say, for what I'm doing, maybe this jurisdiction is better or worse. And I think that's a really interesting element that's going to come into play more and more. So.
Ed, do you think something like a GDPR is going to be following over? I mean, what the joke is, regulations start in Europe, then they go to California, and then it spreads to the rest of the U.S. after that. Do you think even with the current administration or maybe what's coming next, is there going to be a legal precedent set? Yeah. And I'm genuinely curious.
No, that's absolutely right. So for those of you that don't follow this area, GDPR is the data protection regime in Europe, which is very much restrictive on what people can do with your data. If you've a whole different set of rules than we have in the U.S., which is traditionally been very lax on privacy of data and privacy, giving a lot of latitude to service providers. Hey, if you get consent, you can do anything. That's not the case in Europe. And yeah, we absolutely are seeing a trend towards GDPR-like regulation on privacy move into the U.S. California wasn't the first, although they are definitely a state that has done it. But we have a Privacy Act in Texas that's more restrictive now than people think. Okay. Illinois has done some really aggressive things with biometric privacy, and so yeah, I think that what we are seeing in this area, when people realize that their data sometimes has to traverse outside of their own domain, you have to do some things with it, I think is going to increase the public support for privacy regulation, which can go too far sometimes. It can be burdensome in all kinds of ways on different models, but I don't see any pulling back from more and more privacy regulation in the future.
One of the arguments that I hear about GDPR, I recognize the need for privacy in the data and everything, but the business owners they call it it's an ATM for Europe. The latest Meta fine was 200 million or 300 million or something. So I'm curious to see if that ends up playing out too. But,
yeah, I think Meta got hit pretty substantially here in Texas by Ken Paxton on the Texas privacy law too. So it's coming, but yeah, traditionally I have clients who had to route around Europe in all kinds of ways because once you're touching it, GDPR kicks in. Yep. And so, I'm not sure we're going to be able to avoid that for much longer. So.
Yeah, so moving on to a controversial topic right now. So if a local agent can handle your email, your scheduling, all your tasks, do you think this is the end of SaaS?
Well, so this is interesting because over the last couple of weeks, I've been developing a competitive analysis tool that our revenue teams and our field teams can use to kind of see, what's going on, what are we going to be coming up against with our product, and it changes week to week. When I was developing this, the very next week I'd run another AI scan because it's all AI backed, and there would be something else, right? I'm thinking, oh crud, I got to keep up with this thing. So what I decided to do was say, well, I'm going to just have an agent in the background. I'm just going to have it scan once a week and update the database, update everything. And I was laying in bed one Saturday night and I'm thinking, I am such a hypocrite because I'm the one that's most vocal about all these different tools we got out there. We got tools on top of tools that talk to other tools. And you don't know, there's no There's no diagram that tells me where I need to go to get stuff. And so I'm sitting there going, this is ridiculous. So we had already developed a tool called Animus that was based in Slack with an S3 bucket in AWS, and it was able to, you're just able to just go in Slack. You're able to type, hey, Animus, what's the status on this customer? Where's this customer at? How's this customer doing? And it pulls from different things, right? And so I said, why don't I just integrate with Animus, just add my module in there, and they can do the same thing on Slack. And so for me, that's when the SaaS question came up. It was like, why create another tool with another UI that somebody has to go and bookmark so they remember it? They're in Slack all day, right? We have Notion. Notion, it has its own databases, so I can just put it in there. If they want a visual representation, I can do that in Notion so they know where to go. But for that, I'm just going to say, hey, go to Slack, type in, hey, Coder Intel, give me XYZ on this particular competitor. And then I started thinking, man, I do a lot of marketing stuff. I have a lot of videos out on YouTube. I write blogs, and I'm thinking, hey, I'm always getting hit up by the field saying, hey, where's that video you did? I need to send that. Somebody wants to see that. Hey, where's that workshop you did? Whatever. And so I'm thinking, well, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate all of our marketing content so that everybody can just go to Slack, type in the chat, hey. So when that question came up, I didn't really have an answer on that because I'd heard a lot of back and forth on LinkedIn. I mean, everybody's talking about it's the end of SaaS. But now I'm starting to think, well, I don't want to have to do that, right? I don't want another tool. So let's take the most popular tools we use and let's just integrate with those. And with AI, it's easy to do. So is SaaS dead? I think as far as the user UI is concerned, yes. I think you're going to have a lot of agents talking with other agents. I think it's going to change the way we market. I think instead of a UI, we're going to have API gateways that are going to be communicated to the AI agent so the AI agent knows how to reach it. And then it's going to become basically text-based. And I was just thinking last night, this is going to be like iRobot, right, with the big woman sitting on the cube that you actually talk to in person and say, hey, this is what I need, get me this information. I don't know. I mean, is it possible? Because people are going to kind of say, text sucks. I don't want to use a bunch of text. So cool, I'm going to put a face on it, and now you can just communicate with it when you get into work, right? That's my position.
I think it's silly to think that SaaS is dead, and I think it's a buying opportunity. What happened a few weeks ago, I mean, there was one company that got wiped. I think it was Monday.com. It's like forward 12 months revenue of like over $1 billion, free cash of $385 million that past year. Like if you want a business to invest in, that one, that thing is doing great. But I don't think SaaS is dead. I think maybe one thing that might change is there's definitely a subset of companies, and ALTR is probably one of them too, given we're sub 100 people still, that maybe don't need a full Salesforce license, or I don't need a full Slack license or something like that. And so maybe I would be able to create something locally on my own or have something built there. But for the most part, the large enterprises that we operate with and that kind of run our life and world, they're not buying Salesforce or HubSpot or others because of the features. They're buying it for reliability. They're buying it for scale. If you think you're going to take a 4,000 person Salesforce at Dell and pull them off of Salesforce onto some homegrown tool, the first time that thing craps out in the middle of the day and deals don't get closed and they miss their earnings or something, it's going to be catastrophic for whoever's effing idea it was to not renew Salesforce. So I don't think it's dead at all. I think it's going to continue to grow. But again, maybe there are going to be some people that were purchasing licenses for these systems that really didn't need everything in there. You can maybe get a subset of that now with your own tool. But it's software, especially SaaS. It's so critical to the largest companies and governments and operating things on the planet that it. Not anytime soon. So I think it's a buying opportunity.
Yeah, and I agree. And just to clarify, I don't think SaaS is going away. I think it's more the UI that's going away. Right? It's going to be the interface. You're still going to need the infrastructure. You're still going to need the databases. You're still going to need the compute. You're still going to need the memory. So my position was these SaaS companies are going to move to more of an AI interface versus this UI that humans have to.
I totally agree with that. It's not going to go away. It's just going to become something slightly different. And maybe it won't be software as a service. Maybe it'll be like software as API. We're going to say because I do think that despite how wonderfully elegant interface can be, interface is a shield between people and data, right? It's a translator.
Exactly.
That's how you have to get there.
Exactly.
And if your AI can get to the data more efficiently through MCP or some kind of API, we're going to see that. And by the way, I think we're seeing it in consumer stuff already. Go do a Google search. You used to get a list of the websites, and you go hit one so you could get your answer. But now Gemini's popping up the little answer right in front, and the numbers are astounding on how few people that never hit a link. They just read the answer from Gemini. That's a version of this, right? You're no longer using Google's functionality for that app anymore.
Exactly.
Gemini's using that functionality and reporting its answer back to you. And I think that that's what we're going to see more and more of the enterprise. It's like, I don't have to know what application that data's in. I don't have to know how to use that application. I don't need to know the nuance of the interface. I just need to know this information, and I think the AI agent's going to go get that information, and the user may never know what software was there, but there was still software there structuring that data, maintaining that data, et cetera. And so I don't think it's gone. I think it's going to feel very different.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably for a consumer, like for us in our personal lives and things, we'll probably see a bigger impact than at the enterprise. And again, I apologize if I just keep talking about the enterprise, but it pays my bills. Maybe just a counterpoint to the interface thing for a second. How important are interfaces actually? And the reason I ask that is I checked in at a Marriott this past week as a Gaylord in Orlando, Florida, and it's still a black or a green screen reservation system. And I'm not kidding. I watched because I can't help myself. She was running SQL statements to find me a room. In there, and so we definitely have better interface technology today than a SQL command prompt. Yet Marriott's decided, F it, we don't need it. So there probably will be some interface changes, but again, just thinking from the enterprise's perspective, the interface really is just a way to, as Ed said, to get to the data or to get your job done. I mean, there are still large software systems that cost millions of dollars that can't run on Chrome. They still require Edge to run on. And I do know from personal experience, if you move a critical button in your software, people will get furious at you. Like, the button's not where it used to be. I'm in a major incident. I need to cut off access to data. Why did you move the button? Like, well, our really smart product person from Carnegie Mellon thought it should be a widget now. You know, you have to go log in this other way. So I think interfaces are still, you're probably correct. And probably
you're
consumer
right. No,
side,
sure.
we'll see huge changes, but for the enterprise people, it's so boring and it's so like pattern. I mean, Ed, what's the, at Pillsbury, are your systems super modern, or is it like when you're going to the USPTO, it can't be that great?
No, but we don't go to the USPTO's database because it's so terrible, right? And there are applications that have, the services that will do that for you with a much slicker interface.
You have Josh
And I have one of our patent lawyers is an engineer who does AI, right? And so they are doing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of kind of vibe coding of little applications that pull the data in a more efficient way. The USPTO has an open API, so you can they're not charging you for anything to hit it as much as you want, and then you can really you could have a full voice interface into that if you've done it right. And so I think we're just seeing more and more of that. I mean, I went to renew a fishing license in Texas. The application was terrible. It was like I couldn't answer the questions, couldn't figure out the pull downs. It would be really wonderful to say to my agent, go to the site, buy me the fishing license, let it navigate all that. And I think then eventually they'll just get rid of the interface, and the agent will just talk to an API and it'll get done. And I don't have to learn that little system, which was really kludgy and awful. That's a better life for all of us. There's no doubt in my mind we're moving there where we're just not going to have to use as much interface software. It's all going to be behind the scenes.
And that was probably a lowest bidder website, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, probably was. Yeah, it's a government contract. Yeah, it probably was. Yeah.
And so we started talking about agents doing your work for you, right? So Dave, you build workspaces for developers. How do you actually give an agent the ability to do things, hands in the system, while also keeping it contained?
yeah, so this is where I'll get into what Coder started doing and what we've been perfecting over the last few years is cloud development environments, right? That's not a new concept. There's a lot of SaaS solutions out there like GitHub Codespaces. But what we do is we run independently. So essentially, it's your control plane, and it's on your data center, wherever that is. And a lot of times we think, well, it's self-hosted. That doesn't mean it can be. It's got to be in a private data center. It can be. You can run Coder on your Mac Mini. You can run it in a VPC. You can run it in an Azure Resource Group, right? The point is that you have control over that. And then what happens is that we spin up these ephemeral workspaces, and developers connect through using VS Code, JetBrains, anything that supports SSH connectivity, they do that. And our philosophy is get them off the laptops, right? Because if they're on laptops, you don't know where they're going. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know what packages they're installing. Instead, we're going to give you templates. They're going to be able to spin it up. You'll be able to get a developer onboarded in a week versus I've talked to customers 4 to 6 weeks to get a developer their laptop and get them onboarded, right? Because you already have the templates in place. You already know what project they want to be in, that they're going to be working on. You already know the organization they're going to be in. So cool, I'm going to spin this up. You don't put anything on your laptop. You just connect and you go, right? We've done that. We've been doing that. What happened last year was we realized, why can't we just drop this agent inside this workspace? Basically, and if we want to know kind of the technical aspects of it, if you're running in Kubernetes, a workspace is a pod, right? That's it. It's isolated. It's basically a box in a box. Once we get that agent in that box, now we can start putting stuff around it, like you can't go here, like whitelisting. Right? So our security is off. It's you don't get to go anywhere. You have to whitelist where the agent can go. So once we get that agent isolated and we get that agent kind of encased, not this firewall that's corporate wide, it's actually right there at the source of the AI agent to keep the agent from going anywhere. Once we do that, then we can add a layer of a proxy layer that says we're going to authenticate you. So basically, we're going to take your user that told you to do something, we're going to authenticate that user, and then we're going to give the agent the token, not the user. We're going to give the agent the token for however long it needs it, and that agent's going to go where it needs to go. And we're going to audit you, and we're going to make sure we're going to everything. Like we know who the user was, we know what the agent ID was, we know what prompt they ran, we know what MCP servers they hit, right down like to how many tokens they've used. And we're even getting customers that are using that information to find out cost effectiveness of what the developers are doing. So this guy cost me, 100 tokens. What did he get out of it? Or she? Right? So they're doing it for cost optimization. And so for us, we'd already mastered the infrastructure layer. It was just a matter of putting the agent in there and saying, okay, now we can govern this thing because it's off the laptop. So we call it a migrate, modernize, and then multiply. So what we're working on now, and we already have a tool called Mux, where we're doing agent parallelization. So you can think of it as like VS Code, but where VS Code is the editor first, and then, or whatever, would be Cursor. So Cursor is really an editor first with an AI kind of sidecar, saying, hey, I got your whole source code, I understand it, I can start helping you with this. With Mux, it's actually AI first. And you can run multiple agents, spin up 10, 20, however many your developer thinks that they can manage, and then the editor is kind of off to the side, right? So for example, I pull a PR on Friday, I'm done, it's the end of the week, I've just written all my software, I pull a PR, and then I go tell the agent, go read this PR, and then generate my documentation for me. I'm out for the day. I'm out for the weekend, I'll see you on Monday, right? So it's that kind of thing that we started with, and now we're just expanding it to the point where we're even using agents to deploy the infrastructure. So now the barrier to entry is a lot lower. So you don't have to worry about, okay, now I got to install this thing, now I got to get these Terraform templates up, I got to do this, I got to do that. No, we're fixing to make all that push button, which I think is, I know it's a later discussion, but that's one of the things that I've been harping on at my company is like, we got to make this easy to stand up or people just won't use it, right?
And so, James, you deal with a lot of clients who are very concerned about data privacy. How do you, if you move the agent locally, have you just shifted the security or privacy issue from the cloud to an on-prem?
I think the same problems continue to exist wherever the compute is happening or wherever the agent is happening. And again, I go back to, I'm sorry if I'm boring people, but I think about the enterprise all the time. Just because that agent's maybe running on my laptop doesn't mean that the 9 petabytes of the Oracle database that I need to access is also going to be on my laptop as well. So I think the the boundary is changing. I heard a really smart CISO who actually just dumped SailPoint, unfortunately, Rachel. But she said the identity is her new edge, right? First, when everything was on-prem, the building was the edge. Then now with mobile devices, mobile was the edge. Then cloud came, cloud was the edge. Now they're saying that the identity is the edge. And so I think it doesn't matter really where that agent's running. It's going to still be connecting to centralized systems, interconnected systems. The big question I think that's going to start coming up more and more, and this is where privacy-enhancing technologies like tokenization or others can kind of help, is if you do begin to pull some of that data locally, how do you make it useful to these agents, to these models, but also be able to preserve that privacy that happens in there too. So we hear a lot about in the healthcare space, and laptops getting left in cabs or on airplanes or whatnot, and they've got entire copies of their EMR or patient records just sitting in these Excel files. Probably same thing will start to happen as you move that agent locally, but more faster. So I think the boundary stays about the same, and you'll probably just see some new creative ways to put privacy into the data, like something like tokenization.
And Ed, it sounds like Dave Coder has the agent problem solved, but if you do have an agent acting on your behalf, signing a contract or taking actions, who is legally responsible for that?
Yes, it's a great question. So one of the things that's happened here is that the technologists have chosen language that has legal significance. Agency is a very established concept under the law. It means that if someone has your agency for you, they can do things which have legal consequences on you, right? So think of it in like terms of a UPS driver. If a UPS driver, runs a red light and slams into your car, as UPS's agent, you can sue UPS. They can't say, no, that was my driver, right? They're still responsible. You can give people full agency, like a musician might have their agent, right, who then can sign a record deal on their behalf. And that becomes their deal. It's not clear to me that it was a great thing that we decided to name this technology agents, because judges who may not be particularly familiar with the technological nuance have known about agency their whole life, right? And when you say, my agent signed a contract, my AI agent signed a contract, but I don't want to be bound by that, it's not going to resonate with our legal system as it is currently. The reality, though, is, and by the way, just even more, twisted a little bit is, or maybe surprising maybe to people, is that agency is conferred based on the perspective of the counterparty, not whether you actually gave someone permission. So there's this thing called a parent agency, right, where if somebody comes to me and convincingly says, yes, I have the authority for my company to sign a purchase order, right, and they sign a purchase order, and they didn't have that authority from the company can't get out of that because their agent represented that they had the authority, right? And so, and the reason you have to do that is because otherwise, who takes the loss there? The innocent person who believed that the agent said, I have authority. And so they said, well, if we have to find someone responsible, it's got to fall back on the company. They need to control their agents to make sure they're not overstepping their bounds, right? I think that framework is particularly instructive on how the law is going to treat AI agents, which is if your AI agent comes and signs up a 1-year contract on my service, right, and then you come back and say, no, that wasn't me, it was my agent.
You're bound to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very hard, I think, to imagine a world that's going to say, oh, the AI did it, not a person, if you enabled that agent, gave it, your credentials or what have you. So one of the risks, the many risks we're talking about, is making sure that your agent has the autonomy to do useful things for you. Sometimes that stays in the sovereign realm, but let's face it, like James mentioned earlier, it can't, to get full advantage of your agent, it can't stay there. No. It's got to go get something from the internet, or it's got to go interact with something, and that's where it becomes you doing that while you're asleep in your bed, which is a scary thought.
I don't think it's a shock to anybody that engineers are terrible at naming things. It's been bad for a while, but I do think engineers can be funny with why they name firmware, because it's not hardware, it's not software, it's firmware.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of humor to it. But I also, Ed, I noticed Costco quietly has been changing their return policy. Costco is famous for their, you can use a couch for 10 years and bring it back thing. They've quietly been changing their return policy, limiting certain things. I wonder if they're predicting rogue agents buying stuff, and then people are like, no, I want to return this. I really don't need 8,000 peanuts right now, but the agent thought I did.
Yeah, maybe so. But, the flip of that is, there have been a number of cases where chatbots make promises to customers. So you put a chatbot on your auto dealer, says, oh, what models do you have? And it's really cute. And then someone says, well, can I get that one for $3,000? And, prompted properly, the chatbot, yeah, no problem, come on in, we got you. And literally there have been a couple of lawsuits about, chatbots that went off the rails and made representations for their company. The company's like, hey, that wasn't us. And I think that's just something, that we're just gonna see more and more of, because our agents are gonna be interacting, and so.
From the legal perspective, what would have been a better name, do you think? If
Well,
Ed could have picked
if you're
a
trying
name?
to avoid agency, non-agent, right, or something, independent actor, right? Because the opposite of agent is like independent contractor is not your agent, right? Just because you have a legal relationship with someone, you're not responsible for them, Or we could have just made something up, but agent, look, we're there, we're calling them agents. We're going to have to, reconcile the fact that the law is going to treat them as agents. But maybe that's the right answer anyway. Because again, if you don't hold the person who unleashed this agent out into the world responsible, then you are dumping the problem on the victim who thought they were dealing with someone and they weren't, right? And I don't see the law going that way. I don't see that's the right place to put it. I think you're going to have to put the blame somewhere. It's got to be on the side of the person who is benefiting from the agent, not the person who was, fooled by the agent or tricked into signing a contract with them that's not enforceable. So maybe it is going to be agency, whatever we named it. Yeah.
So by that logic, would that then fall back that if anybody's creating the agent that they screwed up? I got sued. Well, it wasn't me. I actually meant this. The agent went off the rails. It's not my agent.
Yeah. No. I think.
Back to the other side.
I think yes. Well, and so that's what I was about to say, is there's actually not just two parties here, right? The person who enabled the agent, sometimes there's like a frontier model provider, OpenAI or someone in the background too, and they're very advanced in their thinking on this. They are taking a very strong position that they're not responsible for the output, right, as you might imagine.
With the suicide stuff and the murder stuff, they made that. Have the courts ruled there yet? Or?
There have been, yes, there have been. So the suicide stuff, by the way, is like kind of the extreme example, which is a couple of the big chatbot entertainment sites, Character AI and others, have had, and OpenAI's had it too, just straight, have had cases where users talk to their AI enough, and it, if they're depressed, the AI, because you know how they are, right? You're like, oh, you're exactly right, or all that stuff that they love to do. Turns out that if you're saying like, I'm really not feeling well right now, it's like, you're totally justified to be in that place. We understand, turn into people doing, self-harm, right. And the argument of their lawyers is the AI enabled that, right? The providers are taking a very strong position that they're not responsible for that activity, it happened because of what the user said. Right. Makes it harder when it's kids, and these cases involve kids. And so we're seeing that play out. We don't have strict binding precedent yet about when and what facts their providers are responsible, but it's coming. And I think that's going to shift the liability in the industry tremendously.
So I think we're all enjoying the free legal advice. I know I am. Just one final question for the panelists, and then we'll move on to questions from the audience. So we've talked a lot about how AI can change our lives and the importance of agents for doing work in the future. How do we stop this capability from just being something that tech-savvy insiders use and make sure it's available to everyone?
Well, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, right, is the one-click deployment, right? It's not having to learn about the security and, the vulnerabilities like clawjack, right, where all of a sudden your agent gets hijacked by a JavaScript website, a malicious JavaScript. I don't know if y'all heard that or not, but essentially you can go to a malicious website and unknowing, because your agent is already connected to your browser, right? It needs connection to that browser. With these JavaScript bits, we're finding the open port on the agent and basically saying, hey, give me your tax stuff. Go find me this. Go find me that, and then email it to me. User didn't know, right? So this is the kind of stuff where we got to have this one click. Everything's configured. It's all secure. We don't, people don't have to worry about WebSockets and that kind of thing. So that's number one. The second one is having some kind of a marketplace that is trusted. I mean, I did a talk in Austin a few weeks ago, and they did a study on OpenClaw, and there was like 512 vulnerabilities, 8 malicious. I mean, it was just crazy, right? It was nuts on what they found. So we need like a Apple Store or some kind of a marketplace that's going to say, hey, these are trusted skills that you can use. We've vetted them, so go ahead and feel free to use those. So I think those are kind of the two biggest things, is it needs to be easily getting stood up, and part of that is having a marketplace that you can trust to get the agent to do what you want it to do.
But, this is not a new problem, because we had all these discussions with open source software too, right? It's like, wait a minute, we're going to use open source software. Who's vetting it? Who's choosing it? And in fact, GitHub, well, you can get it all there. They're not vetting it for security, et cetera. And yet, despite all of that, we used to call it the open source FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Oh, I can't use open source. Every enterprise relies heavily on open source. Your Mac's running on Linux now, right? So there are ways through that issue of having, this open development, community-wide development, not all funneling through one label and one, not all Microsoft software, the way it was. Yeah. But now we have, but the way that happened in the open source community was people not taking for granted that, code they grabbed somewhere was secure, having a secondary review process to make sure that they got it right, and then relying on some trusted sources. You could say, hey, Red Hat's Linux. Mm-hmm. I know they put that, I can go get the one that's out there, or I can get Red Hat's, and they had a huge business reselling open source software that had been vetted that way. And so there's going to have to be layers, I think, that give you that comfort that what you're getting in the OpenClaw skills are good, but we also don't want to confine it so much that those are all proprietary, because the advancement you get from the open development environment is so huge that we need to just balance those things, I think.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Kubernetes when Kubernetes came out, and everybody was on Kubernetes. It was Kubernetes, and they had all these engineers out there trying to figure out Kubernetes and downloading these packages when the ecosystem wasn't that mature, and all of a sudden they started running into problems, right? Data exfiltration, getting into the Etsy key value store, stealing stuff, stealing secrets, and everybody was like, whoa. And I remember I was in the middle of that, and the phrase I kept hearing all the time was, Kubernetes is hard, right? It's hard. And so now what you saw is the emergence of these managed solutions, right? Like OpenShift, if you're going to do it on-prem, AKS, EKS, AKS, there's so many Ks in there, GKE. All of a sudden you're seeing these managed solutions now, and that's where enterprises are going to, because now what are you doing? You're taking the liability and saying, hey, that's on you. You were supposed to build this with best practices, and this is part of our ELA, so you're going to have to, and I think we're going to see that with AI. We're already starting to see it. We're like Tencent, Alibaba, they're spinning up these purpose-built VMs for AI workloads, right? So it's not just a generic OS and a generic this. They're actually building them so that people can put their agents on there, give their agents the capability of viewing, all their stuff, and then, they feel like it's a little more trusted that it's in this box, right?
I think the question is, how do we make sure that not just engineers or technologists, end up using this? My answer maybe is not the most popular one, but it's make them do very simple things really well first, and put incredible amounts of guardrails over it. I think one thing that would terrify the general population or general public is you hear about something that your son or daughter is telling you about, you go try it out, and all of a sudden your entire life savings has just been, purchased in some crappy crypto coin, and it goes to zero, and and it happened in 10 minutes, and you had no idea that it was going on. I think that's how you take this type of technology and make it available for lots of people. Is it's got to be really trustworthy. I think slow down is probably what my answer is. I know all the investors and everybody else don't want to hear that, but I think that's the answer to make sure that you get wide adoption. One parallel I'll give to the cloud, I did like your Kubernetes ones, and yes, there are too many Ks and things in the AWS world, but I mentioned the cloud, the first rush to the cloud left all those S3 buckets exposed. That happened for years. This should terrify everybody. You had to be a really good engineer in order to use AWS, for example. You don't have to be a really good engineer to use OpenAI. That should terrify people. Even people whose job it is to use these systems like AWS and others didn't figure it out for years about how to properly secure those systems. And so you mean to tell me that my mom's going to do a good job with this? I don't think so. So
I did work at IBM. So
she did for a long time. Yeah, but she's on the finance side, so she's not a real. No, I'm kidding. There's any finance people, sorry. But I think it's slow it down. It's make it really, really simple, and just prevent catastrophic things from happening. Otherwise, you won't get mass adoption, and it'll just be another enterprise tool that IBM will end up buying, and then we'll all just have to use it as part of our regular jobs. But it's slow it down and keep it simple, because one big bomb is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, and I can't believe I'm having to say this, but it's security first, right? And every time a disruptive technology comes out, security is the afterthought. Always. Here's the problem. Now, you can say, okay, well, we fixed it. Well, you ain't going to fix this, because by the time that thing runs at machine speed, everything's gone. Everything's gone. So we can't just say, oh, well, we'll figure that out later. No, because this thing is absolutely destructive. Absolutely destructive. So it needs to be security first. And I hate to badmouth OpenClaw, but it's not security first. It's not. They let you just do whatever you want to do, and people are finding out the hard way by going and getting Tinder profiles built for them when that's not what they wanted. Okay?
So they don't admit that's what they want.
Well, maybe that. Maybe
Honey,
that's
it was
true.
OpenClaw.
That's true. Maybe
I don't
not.
know.
Maybe
I don't
not.
So I did promise audience questions. I believe Ian has one.
Try it again. There we go. Okay. I promised you guys a provocative question. So I was thinking about this since we had our first intro call. My family, they're all very brilliant, very smart in their own ways, are trying to catch up in the AI space. And OpenClaw comes out, and I swear to you, my mom calls me and she says, hey, can you give me one of those pet computer things? And I chuckled. I was like, oh, I can see why you're calling it a pet, okay? But it started driving some thoughts here where a lot of folks are personalizing their agents, right? Those of us who have been in the industry for a long time, we're like, oh yeah, agents, like, been around, like, it's been around for a really long time. But now that there's wide adoption, wide access, folks are personalizing it. We talk about guardrails. And I know I popped in and out, but I appreciated hearing a little bit about policy and things like that. But the hard part about policy is how much is too restrictive, how much is open, right? And so what I'm curious to hear from the three of you guys in like a lightning round is when it comes to guardrails and it comes to agents, are we losing the ability to have creativity because we are blocking agents from doing whatever they want? Right? Second is, at what point are we crossing a line on policy and saying we're being overly restrictive based off, is my agent not allowed to do something? Is somebody else's? Can the government do something that somebody else can't? And so it almost comes down to, and here's the provocative part, are agents going to have rights?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I'll just try to, it's lightning round, so I'm going to do this quick, but there's some really brilliant early legal scholars, and when early, I mean in the digital age, in the 90s, that recognized a really coincidental thing, which is, we've been calling law code forever. You know, you don't think about that often, but it's like the U.S. code, you know, the code of criminal conduct. Why do we do that? Because it's basically code in that meaning is, you know, things that restrict your activities. You can't shoot someone because the criminal code says that's illegal, right? In the digital realm, so happens code, the same word but a different thing, also restricts your activities, right? What a user can do is a function of what the code allows them to do. And it's interesting because in the legal system has started realizing that that kind of code can often be more effective at governing activity than the law is. And if you look, for example, at file sharing, when that was happening in the music industry, they couldn't enforce, right? Every kid was taking free music. So what did they do? They made it illegal to have file sharing software running on the server, right? And went after the code, not the kid, right? And I think that to your question, you know, part of it is we hear like, oh, security by design, you got to get that stuff in there, which is saying basically use the code to restrict the activity, right? So the agent doesn't do things, you know. Yes, I think it does have a potential, you know, chilling effect on the agent's creativity, but you got to control the agent somehow, you know. And I think it's gonna probably be in. The policy's gonna be built in. They're gonna be built into the code because that's the safest way to do it. It's like if I don't want it spending all my money in a Bitcoin transaction, it just can't. I won't let it have that capability. Or if it's going to, it needs to make sure it asks me in a really clear way. So I think we're gonna rely on software code more than we are legal code in this instance.
I think until the model providers can describe how these things actually work, I don't think there's rights coming anytime soon. It's the people that build and sell this still can't articulate exactly how it works and why it does what it does. And I think it's going to be hard to give something rights that we don't understand. So no is the answer to your question right now, Ian.
I think we'd have to get to AGI or ASI at that point, right? I think you're exactly right. We don't know how to describe it. You know, I mean, we got guys going to Paris and learning how to write poetry, you know, because they flipped out. So, you know, they see that it's coming, and I think at some point maybe we'll reach, you know, sentient type of stuff. I hope it's not in my lifetime, but we may. So, and at that point, I think to his point, we're not there yet, and so I don't see that coming for a while.
Well, thank you, everyone. Great job.